Shalom, I'm Valerie Moody of Covenant Footsteps Ministries, and today is Lesson 9 in our series on the Moedim. This lesson is uncovering the first of the first. We will explore Yom HaBikurim, the Feast of First Fruits, or Day of the First Fruits. Since the Hebrew language is the language of creation, the term Bikurim, or first fruits, offers insight for us from its spelling. Bikurim contains the Hebrew letter Kaf. And Kaf is the first letter in the Hebrew word kather, or crown. Thus, our first fruits offerings are a crown. They crown the Holy One as the King of our harvest and the King of our lives. There are stages in God's redemptive plan through Yeshua. His redemption unfolds through the first three festivals during the season of unleavened eating. The stages are justification, sanctification, and glorification, for lack of better English terms. These words are words we've heard before, but we've never fully understood how they apply to Passover, Hag HaMatzot, and Yom HaBikurim. This feast, the Feast of First Fruits, is the third stage of his plan. Let's take a closer look at the stages before we explore the depths of this festival. Passover marks the sacrifice of Yeshua. Hag HaMatzot, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, marks the burial of Yeshua. Yom HaBikurim marks the resurrection of Yeshua. Passover depicts justification. God spares Israel's sons on Passover in Egypt, not because they're better than Egypt's sons. No, he spares them because they are justified. In Exodus 12, verse 13, a spotless Passover lamb dies in their place, and its blood covers their door. Likewise, he spares us from death because we are justified. The spotless Lamb of God dies in our place, as 1 Corinthians 5:7 declares, and his blood covers the door of our life. Now, Hag HaMatzot is akin to sanctification. Hag HaMatzot, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, coincides with the Exodus and the burial of Yeshua. When the Israelites depart Egypt, they must be sanctified from Egypt. Their outward deliverance must be accompanied by an inner deliverance from everything which is Egyptian or heathen in nature. Adonai begins to sanctify his people by calling the Israelites to put away the leaven in Exodus 12, verses 17 through 20. Hag HaMatzot denotes our sanctification through emunah, trust in the sacrifice of Yeshua, according to Hebrews 10:14. It's also our trust in the power of the Spirit to cleanse us. Hebrews 10:14 states, "For by a single offering he has perfected for all time those who are being sanctified." He conforms us to the image of our unleavened Messiah as we depart our personal Egypt. Finally, Yom HaBikurim, the Feast of First Fruits, parallels glorification. Yom HaBikurim coincides with Yeshua's resurrection or glorification and the Red Sea crossing, which is a type of glorification for the Israelites. Messiah's resurrection is not random. It is timed to the Feast of First Fruits and Israel's deliverance through waters of separation. Waters of separation at the Red Sea symbolize resurrection from death to new life, which is a type of glorification. Now we are glorified for a future resurrection through our Master Yeshua. Yom HaBikurim concerns glorification and the glory of resurrection. It is a first fruits offering which gives him glory, but its date is historically debated. Leviticus 23:10 through 11 states, "Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when you enter the land which I'm going to give you and reap its harvest, then you shall bring in the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. He shall wave the sheaf before Adonai for you to be accepted. On the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. Now, in the Second Temple era, Pharisees and Sadducees strongly disagreed over this passage and the timing for the Feast of First Fruits. Pharisees assert that the Sabbath in Leviticus 23:11 is the high Sabbath on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So for them, the day of First Fruits is the next day, the second day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Following the temple's demise in the year 70, the Pharisees assume leadership and they direct people away from reliance on the temple altar to reliance on prayer and rabbinic halakha. Most people celebrate the Feast of First Fruits, as the Pharisees did for this reason, on Nisan 16, the second day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the Hebrew calendar reflects this. Conversely, Sadducees contend that the Sabbath in Leviticus 23:11 is the weekly Sabbath during Pesach. So for the Sadducees, the day of first fruits is Yom Rishon, the first day of the week. Yom Rishon is both the first day and the eighth day in Hebrew reckoning, since both are new. 8 is the number of new beginnings. In the year Yeshua dies and resurrects, the Sadducees ironically pinpoint the day of his resurrection. Quite ironic, considering Sadducees do not believe in resurrection, an afterlife, spirits, or miracles. Nevertheless, Sadducees control both the temple and the Sanhedrin during the years of Yeshua's ministry on the earth. Consequently, on Nisan 17, the Sadducean high priest is raising Israel's Bikurim, or first fruits offering at the temple altar. Now, lifting at the altar depicts resurrection. Let's not forget that this is the day that Yeshua also resurrects from the dead. Messiah rises on Yom HaBikurim, early on the first day of the week after the Shabbat of Pesach. Between Havdalah and the break of dawn, he resurrects in power in Yochanan chapter 20. Yeshua goes to the Father on Nisan 17, as Yochanan 20 verse 17 affirms. So as the high priest is waving the first fruits offering on Yom HaBikurim, Yeshua is waving himself before the Father in heaven as the first fruits from the dead. Hebrews 8 verse 5 confirms that the temple and its service is a copy and shadow of the heavenly. Yeshua is the first fruits on the day of first fruits. He also returns to his Talmudim on Nisan 17, as stated in Yochanan 20 verse 19. On Nisan 17, his Talmudim see the risen Messiah. His resurrected body is not bound by time and space. He walks through walls and only moments later can eat solid food. The disciples witness a mofaith, a wonder. Yeshua is a spiritual mofaith. He's also a physical mofaith. Yeshua is physical in the sense that he is seated in human form. He is spiritual in the sense that he rises glorified in resurrection. The risen Master moves translocationally and transdimensionally. He exists inside time and space. He exists outside time and space. Colossians 1, 16 through 17 reveals this truth. Messiah creates everything in the heavens and on the earth, visible and invisible. All things hold together in him and exist for him and through him. Yeshua is the first of the first. Rabbi Paul links Messiah's resurrection to the Feast of First Fruits in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 20. He declares, Messiah has been raised from the dead and is the first fruit of those having fallen asleep. Now, first fruit is code language for Yom HaBikurim. Thus, Yeshua is the first fruits of the resurrection, and Paul is confirming it in this verse. Now, the Feast of First Fruits is the day at the temple when farmers are offering their first fruits as well. They're bringing their bikurim from their barley crop. Their offering is the decisive climax of weeks of searching their barley fields. Barley is the first ripe grain in the ancient Near East. Its appearance illustrates resurrection from the death of winter. When a farmer sees the bikurim or first fruits from the barley, he binds it with a cord or a reed of grass to set that sheaf apart and consecrate it from the rest of the field. Metaphorically, he is binding it as a symbol of resurrection, and he is declaring these are the first fruits. He dedicates the bikurim, the first fruits, before he harvests his crop. This is really critical because he's offering first fruits before he knows what the full harvest will be. Let's consider the first fruits of Cain and Havel. Genesis 4, verses 3 through 5 describes their first fruits offerings. It states, "And it came to be in the course of time that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to Adonai, and Havel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And Adonai had regard for Havel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain became very angry, and his face was downcast." Now, this famous account of Cain and Abel concerns a mincha, an offering or a gift for the Almighty. Hebrew sages rightly note a subtle but clear distinction between their two offerings. Havel brings the firstborn of his flock, alluding to the first fruits, the first and the best. He offers the firstborn with its fat, and that's a critical detail. This denotes a sacrificial blood atonement offering. This type of offering is used to redeem firstborn sons and atones for sin in Leviticus 3, verse 16. Therefore, Havel's offering is pleasing to Adonai because it is a reflection. His offering reflects what the Messiah does for us from the foundations of the earth. Havel's offering is not simply a gift, it is an admission. He admits his need for atonement and his need for redemption. Yeshua calls Havel righteous in Matthew 23:35. Hebrews 11:4 describes Havel's offering as a sacrifice so excellent it still speaks today. Cain, however, simply brings the fruit of the ground. His offering does not acknowledge his need for blood atonement or redemption. The Almighty accepts Havel's offering, but he turns away from Cain's offering, and Cain's name means spear. After his offering is rejected, he begins to use his spear for murder rather than tilling the ground. So there is a prophetic revelation in the meaning of his name. And Havel, whose name means breath, offers his final breath of life back to the Creator. From Cain and Havel, we learn two precepts. First, our first fruits must first address our need for Yeshua and his sacrifice. His blood atonement before the Father is the ultimate offering. It's the ultimate bikurim offering for us. Second, giving our first fruits offering means offering the first and the best to him. Now, divine multiplication can occur when we offer Adonai our first fruits with a right heart. And there is a biblical reference for this. For instance, a divine multiplication occurs in the days of the prophet Elisha in 2 Kings 4, verses 42 through 44. A man brings his barley first fruits to Elisha at the school of the prophets. This is evidence that some godly Israelites are refusing to worship in Jeroboam's pagan shrines. Jeroboam prohibits them from going up to Jerusalem, and he stations guards along the road to make sure they don't. But a devout northern Israelite farmer can still declare or dedicate his crop to God by taking his first fruits to the schools of the prophets. And this chapter reveals that. This man's offering of 20 barley loaves and a little grain is not large. He can carry it all in one sack. But Elisha blesses the offering, and he predicts a divine multiplication of this first fruits offering, this bikurim. A miraculous multiplication does occur. The barley loaves feed 100 student prophets, and his servant picks up leftovers. This is a prototype for Yeshua's miraculous feeding of the 5,000 with barley loaves in Yochanan 11, verses 9 through 13. First fruits are not simply an act of obedience, but an act of reliance. The offerer relies upon the Creator for sufficiency and abundance, since we give first fruits before we know what our full harvest will be. James 5, verse 7 further explores the aspect of resurrection in the first fruits. He states, "So brothers, be patient until the coming of the Master. See, the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently for it until it receives the fall and spring rains." Okay, several things are going on here. Yaakov writes of the Peri Ha-Eretz, the fruit of the earth, and he's quoting a Hebrew brakah. The brakah is this: Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri haaretz. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, King of the universe, who brings forth the fruit of the earth. Yaakov intrinsically links first fruits to prayer, knowing that first fruits offerings require prayer. He also speaks of fall rains and spring rains. Fall rains coincide with the high holy days. Therefore, fall rains are a metaphor for judgment. Spring rains coincide with Yom HaBikurim, and spring rains are a metaphor for resurrection. James 5:7 describes patience, which is born of hope in the resurrection. Yeshua is the first fruits of resurrection. Therefore, we hope in the promise of resurrection for us. Romans 8:11 explains this. If the spirit of him who raised Yeshua from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Messiah from the dead shall also give life to your mortal bodies through his spirit dwelling in you. In conclusion, Yom HaBikurim, the Feast of First Fruits, abounds with faith or wonder. It coincides with the wonder of Yeshua's resurrection and another resurrection, which occurs in Matthew 27, verses 52 and 53. This passage states, "The tombs were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after Yeshua's resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many." Now these saints are the early first fruits of the final redemption in the Acharit HaYamim, the end of days. Yom HaBikurim holds a future promise, which resembles a public adoption. In Bible days, persons being privately adopted by Romans were brought into the forum and publicly owned. At the final redemption, we are publicly owned by the Father before men and angelic messengers. Our corruptible bodies shall put on incorruption. Our mortality shall put on immortality. As 1 Corinthians 53 through 54 announces, until then, let us celebrate the feast of first fruits and recall the wonderful first fruits of resurrection in the end of days. As we celebrate Yom HaBikurim, let us rejoice that He resurrects, and we too will one day resurrect. Up next is Lesson 10, the Beloved Seventh. The Beloved Seventh explores counting 7 sevens during Sefirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. I'm Valerie Moody of Covenant Footsteps Ministries. Shalom.